Well, hello there. How is everyone? I hope you're all well. You amazing, beautiful, wonderful people. This is video de. Was earlier, de is now, and toi is later. See, I even teach French over here. I'm like a teacher, but better. Anyway, let's get straight into the meat and potatoes as we have some stuff to go through. Earlier on today, we looked at the incredible, uncredible, non-credible, credible. If you judge Hitler, she's credible. Dylan Mortensen, and the fact that she didn't see a face. But anyway, apparently you don't need to see a face. You just need to be able to repeat the words bushy eyebrows, and then you're in. You're in the club. You're in the clear. You're definitely not going to be getting called out for not reporting a crime for 8 hours. But that's by the by. Look, what we want to do in this video is look at issues. We've got a trial incoming, if it gets that far. Now, I'm pretty sure that it will. If Judge Hitler has anything to do with it, it's going to go to trial, whatever, even if Ann Taylor's not ready. But look, it is what it is. We'll get there, and who knows? Who knows? Maybe there'll be loads of stuff that comes out. The guilters seem to think that the prosecution are planning a trial by ambush, clearly. And look, that is what it might be. Or it might just be a hugely circumstantial evidence with lots and lots of things being hidden away, covered up, ignored, and it's going to be a shit show. And then it might end up with a hung jury, which I think, if it's a fair trial, if it's fair, which that's a fucking massive if it's fair, hung jury incoming, I believe. If it's not fair, then it's going to end up going to appeal. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at exactly what there is in terms of a case. We're just gonna put it out. I went over some notes with my man Eddie. You know that me and Eddie do some collaborative work in the background. I am not Eddie. Some people think that Eddie is just my alter ego. He is not. He is someone who follows this case, and he's a lot smarter than what I am. And it would appear he's a lot smarter than a lot of people around this case as well. Some of them who happen to walk into the courtroom, it seems. But anyway, again, that's by the by. Let's get into it. I'm going to put some notes on the screen because I am getting old and I can't remember all of this stuff. But look, we look at the state and prosecution and what they intend to use. What do they actually have, right? What do they have? And then in a bit, we're going to be looking at what they don't have, which is interesting considering we're staring down a barrel, no pun intended, of a trial. So they have images of a 2014 and 2015 Elantra. That's what they intend to use. That's what they intend to use. 2014, 2015 Hyundai Elantra images. Coloured maps insisting the car may have stopped, did a U-turn, and using headlights as evidence when no one on Walenta headlights were going in the opposite directions at the same time. So what they're trying to do is where there's gaps in footage and you see lights and lights going up and down, they're not suggesting there's multiple cars in the area. They're suggesting that that's the same car that's just behaving incredibly strange, including doing multiple U-turns in the area. That kind of gives you DoorDash vibes or someone looking for an address and they just simply can't find it. So they go up a road, they can't find it. It's dark, they can't see house numbers. So they go up and then they have to turn around and go. Do you know what I mean? That's what we have. So it says putting Riley Nolan on the stand to give her opinion when she stated she wasn't involved in the DNA or reports and thought she thought BK's DNA was on the sheath, which we put in brackets here, corporate suicide, put her ass on the stand. She claimed the claimed match to the sheath wouldn't need an explanation, opinion, or further evidence. Bushy eyebrows as probable cause. Bushy eyebrows, which goes back into what we spoke about at the beginning of this video. And the credible or uncredible, non-credible, incredible, absolutely not credible, didn't see a face, Dylan Mortensen. Asking the court to at least allow them to mention the IGG to show how the investigation progressed. The poster child of insanity. Right, Payne? Who was involved with you? You know you shouldn't have signed the arrest warrant. And it says, and then we've got using DM statements and lack of identification of Kohberger. They can't be for real. Again, this is calling someone credible who is absolutely not. Absolutely not. She's the poster child for for not being reliable. If you look in the diary dictionary, in that book where it's got words and pictures, and you look up non-credible witness, you got her face there. Because in this situation, and that's no hate on her. That's not hating on Dylan Mortensen. That's just based on what we've seen, heard. She's not a credible witness because she didn't see fuck all. And what she did see, or what she's later gone on to say she saw, has been hugely influenced by law enforcement guiding her, that conditioning, which we've spoken about multiple times around this case. We have all been conditioned to think certain things, to see certain things. The guilters are buried in it. They are absolutely buried in it because they seem, and it's not their fault, it's just that they are easier to condition, and once they've gone through that conditioning, they can't shake it off. It's like a Velcro monkey. They can't get rid of them. Do you know what I mean? Velcro monkeys, let's call them that. So it says, attempting to limit Dylan Mortensen's testimony among many others. Kohberger's alleged STR profile. Duke traffic stop. Okay, what does this have to do with anything other than further attempts to place PK in Moscow? There is no relevance to it. Like they say, it's to prove that he fucking what? He owns the car and he owns the phone. What, and you need to do that? No, you're trying to, again, paint a picture. They're latching on to this stalking narrative. And even though they want to try and argue it, it's all about that because they need it. They need it. And that was the conditioning that everyone went through right at the beginning, to believe that this was a stalking narrative. Stalker narrative. Using the words touch DNA at trial. Because this word, this touch, and we heard about this in the last hearing, Bigger Barlow to come forward. That is so fucking misleading. It is unreal. Because again, it's about conditioning. You condition people by saying touch. If I say touch, I'm going to touch you, then you're gonna probably like it. Do you know what I mean? But you know what touch is. We think touch and feel, and you've physically got to grab something. You need to remove that, put in transfer. That's what you need, because it removes touch. Once you've said touch, is it like bushy eyebrows? Once you've said bushy eyebrows, you look at Bryan Kohberger and you'll think he's got bushy eyebrows, when in reality he's got a prominent brow bone. But in the grander scheme of things, the guy on Banfield, he had more bushy fucking eyebrows. If I stared at him through a mask and he was looking back at me, the only thing that I'd see was his eyebrows. And I think anybody in that situation where all you've got is a letterbox of their face, and if they had bushy eyebrows, the very first text message that you send to Bethany Funk would be fucking eyebrows on it, mate. I was literally being stared at by eyebrows. Murder and burglary charges to again exacerbate the situation, but I know this is kind of what they have to do in terms of the burglary, entering into a property with ill intent, and that, so on and so forth. But then we look at what they don't have to use at trial. What they don't have. So what we've just gone through is what they intend to use. That's their case. So what don't they have? So we've got this, the identity of Kohberger's car, 2014, 2015, which they don't really have his identity, do they? The car itself, from what we've seen, you can't look at that car and go, oh, that's definitely his. It definitely is, because you can see through the window and see him in it. Or there's no significant detail on it, like maybe if he had a scuff down the side, and you could easily see that there was a scuff down the side of it. There is none of that. Brady violations and a plethora of such behaviour. There is so many issues in this case. The withholding of discovery, the way in which they're handing discovery over, the claims regarding the AT&T advanced timing reports through Ashley Jennings at the moment that we're still kind of going through the mud with. And there's just a lot of shit. that ain't right behaviour. Not for if you think that the prosecution have got their man. They've got their man. They're confident. They've got the evidence to prove it. This is a done deal. They would just go, here's your evidence. That's what we've got. That's what we've got. We've got the right guy. That's what we're bringing to court. And it's as simple as that. There is none of that. You don't see it. It ain't that. You just don't see it. And I know people don't want to hear it, but it is what it is. Ambiguous and partial profile, which is on the DNA itself. Ambiguous and partial. Nobody wants to. You can't pinpoint this DNA with anybody saying we tested this. It was found to be Bryan Kohberger's. Here's the documentation. Here's the chain of custody for that process with people saying yes, we was involved in it. This is what we found. In fact, you've got CODIS didn't find anything. Lab saying you didn't find anything. Offram didn't find anything. Didn't conclude anything. Didn't conclude anything. FBI, stop what you're doing. We'll take it from here. Thank you very much. Cheers to our boy. They go away. They come back just with a name. Again, with Payne saying that at no point, and I think it might have been, again, Nolan, nobody's saying that the FBI said that the DNA on that sheath was Bryan Kohberger's. Again, tell me I'm wrong. Show me I'm wrong. Send me a link. Email me some document where somebody's saying that there is testing done and it tested as Bryan Kohberger's with who did the testing and proof of it. Male A DNA from sheath. FBI's IgG work. Again, ouch. This is what we just touched on. The FBI coming in. Intentionally and knowingly omitting Funk's statement in the PCA. Why would you do that? Why would you try to remove Funk from the equation when you've recently seen the text messages and all this communication, and we know that some of that has been omitted as well? And we know from earlier on in the case that it was stated that Bethany Funk had exculpatory evidence. And this is when all the wheels and cogs start moving towards the grand jury and this blocking. She's not mentioned in the PCA. When you think that there was so much interaction between the two of them right at the time when all this was happening, why would you not include anything that she has to say? Unless she has something to say that completely contradicts what what Dylan Mortenson's saying. Make it make sense. Tell me down below. Let me know. What do you think? Nearly half grand jury members requesting more info to indict. Again, which we heard that was what was being said. There you go. But we know that the bar is low. We know the bar is low. PCA irrelevant without any legal authority to be admitted unless the attending judge signs off. Fact, case progresses. And how can you get a PCA, use that as the actual probable cause for an arrest, and then later on, with no judge involvement, that's irrelevant now? That's irrelevant. How is it irrelevant? The only reason you'd make it irrelevant is if there's information in there that is harmful to you. That's something that's going to come back round and bite you on the arse. And what with the time advance report data and this now swirling around, I can bet my bollocks to a barn dance that there's an issue between where the PCA is stating Bryan Kohberger was, manoeuvres against what can likely be proven that contradicts that. But again, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. So what do we got? What do we got? Numerous false statements and deceptive issues made by police in the PCA. Again, regarding stalking, the entire stalking narrative. It was an absolute massive attempt to condition the reader of that document. And it worked. It absolutely worked, didn't it? Absolutely worked. Because people can't shake that off. And that's again why, as I've mentioned, the touch DNA situation, that word touch, needs to be removed. Several examples of perjury by prosecution members. I don't have to go through any of them. The most recent one again is regarding the time advance reports. They're very, very clever. You have to really listen and pay attention when they say that they didn't get something and they didn't get it through a certain fashion, because it's that sort of caveat to it that protects them almost, because they are. And Ray says it himself. He flat out turns around and says, for them to make the statements that they made, they believe that the court doesn't know what they're talking about, and it enables them to say certain things. And that is what Jennings did. She made a statement that hoodwinked Hitler. And I just hope that what some people feel, that Hitler's just, maybe he's throwing more of a bone to the defense than what we initially thought. And this balance discussion with Ann Taylor will be the turning point. The 4 golden eggs. Preventing Ray's testimony. Remember, Hitler says if needed, he can Zoom. His testimony is already available. Know the exceptional amount of deception in the PCA. I do believe if all phone extraction data were known, the case would end 7 times on a Monday. We know there won't be alignment between phones and all parties. Taking a sample off a sheath, then sending the sheath to the ISP lab. Absolutely nothing suspicious, right? And then we've got not now knowing no car assumed as Kohberger's was missing the front plate. Now knowing no car assumed as Kohberger's was missing the front plate. Knowing the PCA was false, saying Kohberger's car was in front of the house, which they don't place him out the front of the house. They make a statement about a car doing a turn in the road. It's whether you believe the car that is maneuvering around that property to be the perpetrators. Bryan Kohberger's, if you believe he's the perpetrator, when they're very clever in the footage that they use, which was again called out in the most recent hearing. I believe, and I believe Eddie also believes, that they've switched out the cars here, and it's the DoorDash car that they're utilising as the car that's outside the property. Could be wrong. Unknown males and DNA evidence. There's other DNA around this crime scene. How many times have we heard about cases that have gone through the Innocence Project and it turns out that originally there was other DNA found at the scene and it was ignored, and it later on transpires that, oh, lo and behold, that was the person who did the crime in the first place. And we've got a similar situation here. We've got a crime that by its shared mechanics appears to be a multiple perpetrator, either multiple perpetrator or skilled perpetrator, not their first rodeo. You're talking about someone who enters into a house not knowing who's in there, how many people are in there, and does this atrocity in a very quick space of time, and does what they do. And we've heard some of the horrendous details of it. But you've got multiple DNA, including under the fingernails of one of the victims. Unknown males and DNA evidence, which runs on from that. Stalker nonsense, which again, the stalker nonsense which we've touched on. And then the final notes on here. Look, these are a portion of the issues for the state and prosecution, but their problem is overcoming the cover-up without the evidence to convict. Their actions to control the judicial proceedings in their favour wouldn't be necessary if the evidence was there, which is what I said, which I alluded to. Do you know what I mean? They wouldn't behave in the manner that they're behaving if they had what everybody who's a guilter believes that they have. That is not indicative of that. Their behaviour is indicative of a case that relies heavily, if not solely, on circumstantial evidence. If you have a golden egg, a fucking platter handed to you, and this is the guy, then they wouldn't be behaving in the manner that they are. I don't believe so. So then we got here. So their actions to control, in fact, wouldn't be necessary if it was there. So the effort to inundate defense in the meantime appearing as obsequious, I'll get there in a minute, to the court isn't overlooked. In fact, it is very well observed by the court. Then it was determined they did have a pattern of sealing it up, which was recognized by Hitler. Defense will first humiliate these clowns and then be crushed by Bigabarlo. And who accepted her onto the defence's team? The man they thought was too dense to understand their criminal behavior tactics, in thinking they were going to control Hitler's decisions, as Thompson did with John Judge. So again, this is I feel that Eddie has put a lot more trust into Hitler because Hitler has made some decisions. Again, some other people are seeing it as well. I'm a little less trusting, but he has obviously allowed Bigabarlo in, and he's also allowed Ann Taylor access to balance, which needed to happen. If that hadn't have happened, I think my initial thoughts would have been further set in concrete. The police stated it was an isolated targeted attack, soon lifting the shelter in place order. If Kohberger was responsible, the shelter in place order would have extended until they captured him. Yep, there is a good reason to believe something was brewing in the house, and the different behavior of the victims. Steve Gonsalves was the catalyst for the attack. I do get a sense the issues between roommates and others close to them is the answer. Otherwise, why would the shelter in place be lifted so soon after? Then again, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk and the deceased may not have known the attackers. But I do believe there was some knowledge by several it was going to happen. No charges for Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk, right? Okay, because they lived there and in no way implicates either. Do they have some knowledge of why? I believe they do, no question, and so does law enforcement. Now, I know I touched on this briefly before, but I wanted to go through it because we've just come out of the back end of this hearing. I want to go through it in more depth because we are, as aforementioned, we're staring down the barrel of a trial. And I wanted to really touch base on what they have, what they don't have, or what they're planning on using and what they should have, and the general feeling for this case. I've got some other bits and pieces to go through over the next few days. I also want to touch on Hudson Lindau again because we're talking about alternative suspects. And if there's alternative suspects, apparently some tip had gone in and it's raised a very valid suspect possibility. And I think to myself, who could that potentially be? It's going to be very interesting. Is it going to be something from far left that we've not seen? Or is it going to be something that is on the peripheral of these victims? Was it something like what many have believed, that there's a potential for retribution for something that has potentially happened the months leading up to this? But maybe it'll all come out very, very soon. But anyway, until next time, later on today, touching on Liam Payne, I will leave you. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will catch you all later. Love you all. Bye.